Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast. I'm happy to be joined by Ruth Pickering and Matthew Ismail to go. We had a three-part series earlier this year on artificial intelligence and scholarly research. And so this is the culmination of that series where we are going to go deeper to talk about AI with interview with Ruth and Matthew today. So thank you for joining us. I hope you're all doing well. Just a few brief housekeeping notes. I'm Leah Hines, by the way, Executive Director of the Charleston Library Conference. This session is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent out to everyone who's registered for the event. So if you have to leave early and you miss the end of it, there will be a recording available. On that note, we'll also be saving all questions till the end. So if you have a question, you can submit it using the Q&A button. We'll talk a little bit later about how to do that. But we'll save questions for Ruth and Matthew till the end. And please do complete a very short attendee evaluation. When the session closes, you'll be automatically redirected to that. It's like 3 questions, very short, but just let us know how we're doing and if you have suggestions for future sessions. And with that, the session is being held in Zoom. The world runs on Zoom now. But there's, if you've never been on a Zoom webinar, there's when you join, it'll ask you to set up your audio, and using the computer speakers are going to give you the best experience. But if you have problems, you can also connect using your telephone. It'll give you the phone number for how to do that. You can see the icon here at the bottom for raise and lower your hand. We will not be using that today, but the Q&A button is right next to it. So that's what I was talking about. If you have a question, if you think of something during the presentation you want to ask, you can just click that Q&A button, type in your question and hit send, and we'll save those in a queue till the end. So as I mentioned, this session is Going Deeper, AI, Knowledge Graphs, and Scholarly Research. And I'm going to turn things over now to Matthew Ismail, who is our moderator and will be conducting the interview. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Leah. As you can see, I'm Matthew Ismail. I'm Director of Collection Development at Central Michigan University and editor of the Charleston Briefings. The Charleston Briefings are brief books that cover significant topics in the information professions. And of course, AI is a really important topic that many of us hear about, but as like me, don't really understand. So the webinars we've done with briefings authors have sought to address the topic of AI and information professions for non-specialists and some of the big issues concerning AI that would be of concern to us. So Ruth and I, Ruth has been very involved in helping me to get together the people for the briefing and also in arranging the different webinars. And we thought it would be useful to have this final session on AI that features some further discussion of the topic and some practical demonstrations just to sort of see what AI does in many of these topics. And I thought it would be useful to start, Leah, if we could put up the first poll question. Just, familiarity with AI. How would you describe yourself? Are you, do you use AI tools on a regular basis? Do you understand what AI can broadly do, or you're just aware of AI but don't use it? And I'm sure, Leah, I'm supposed to see this.
Yes, you can't see the question?
I see the question, but I don't see the responses. So I don't know if you see them.
I do, so I can narrate that. I'm sorry, I thought it would display for everyone. So we have 12% who say I use AI tools on a regular basis. 38% say I understand what AI can do broadly and use it sometimes. And 50% say I am aware of AI, but I do not use it.
50% like me.
And it looks like the answers are stopping coming in. So I'll go ahead and close this poll.
Okay. Well, I
Here's
think,
the share results. Go ahead. Now,
oh,
can
there
you see
we
it
are.
now?
Yes, thank you.
Got it. Okay. So there's
Well,
the results.
and I think it's, the attendees kind of trend toward knowing, some knowing what AI is broadly and using it sometimes and aware of, but do not use, which makes sense. And some people who are AI professionals. So, why don't we pop over to Ruth and have her discuss some overviews.
Thanks very much, Matthew. And that was a super interesting question, and it's really helpful to understand how people are using AI today. So I actually prepared a couple of slides because AI is a bit like saying, medicine or engineering. It's an absolutely huge topic. And so in terms of what we're going to talk about today, the bits that I'm really going to talk about are knowledge graphs, machine learning, and computational linguistics. So you can see all these other terms here, autonomic computing and fuzzy systems and speech recognition. They are all valid terms if someone's talking about AI, but they're not really what we're going to cover today. So what we're going to focus on is how it can be used really in a kind of library and a research system and in a publishing and a content owner kind of universe. And I wanted to share, before I give you a little bit overview of the technology, I wanted to share a slide that I think really explains kind of why we're focusing on this knowledge graph domain and the very specific elements that relate to it. So I think one of the things that we are all aware of is the volume of information that exists today and the amount that continues to be published. And we know on a personal level how difficult it can be to find what you're looking for. And if you're helping people to find things through a library platform or a publishing platform, equally it's difficult sometimes to narrow down and identify the specific items. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the background to a knowledge graph and why the fact that it's dynamic is so important. So information and content is being published all of the time. And it's not just that there's information or content about something, it's that there are relationships, there are connections between content that are really, really important. And those things also evolve and change over time. So when you look at this picture and you see the changing lines, this is actually an extract from a knowledge graph. And what we're showing here is news being ingested real time from the beginning of this year. And we're looking at how the relationship of tariff and trade war to specific companies is changing in real time in front of our eyes. And the reason I wanted to share this is because I think it just really brings home the point about the dynamic nature of content and the relationship of content and concepts to other ideas, and the fact that it is always changing and the fact that it is so dynamic. And if we think about a lot of the tools and platforms that we may have used historically or may still be using, they don't really allow that kind of dynamism. So when an item of content, for example, is cataloged, it may have a series of keywords, and over time those things may have changed. And even if they remain correct after a few years or a decade, can you connect them to other items of text that are also related? So I'll stop with a graph now, but hopefully that gives a little bit of a sense of the dynamic nature of content and how it can be kept up to date in something like an AI-based knowledge graph. And then I really wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how it all works from a technical point of view, Matthew, if that's okay, in terms of, picking up, how it can work in this kind of environment. So literally what's actually happening is that on the left-hand side, you can see content, and it could be anything. It could be a dissertation in a repository. It could be a government report. It could be a book, a patent. It could be news, as we just saw on the previous slide. And what technology is able to do is to read that algorithmically in real time, in huge scale. So what you can see in the middle is a series of algorithms. And what they're trying to do is recreate a neural network model. So they're trying to recreate how all of us would read information if we were able to read that volume of information. And as we're reading, our brain would extract ideas in the form of concepts, and it will promote them. And in your brain, they're stored in a knowledge graph-like framework. And so on the right-hand side, what you can see is an enormous multi-dimensional knowledge graph with all of these different concepts and ideas. And what's happening as content is continuously up to date is that those relationships will change and they will be kept up to date. Nothing will be lost, but you might see a different change, a different strength of relationship, a different pertinence. You might see new concepts become connected in a way that they haven't necessarily been in the past. And that's kind of what I really wanted to share in terms of background of AI, and also to frame the kind of conversation we're going to have today. And I think this hopefully gives a bit of context of what could be relevant in the environment that we're all in.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for me, the amazing thing about knowledge graphs is the fact that they're dynamic. So much of the traditional way that we deal with information and cataloging and so on, cataloging and storing information is static. So, you know, we all know that the more you know about something, the more complex your understanding becomes, and that adding new information doesn't just make the same thing be more, it actually changes context. You know, more information is context. So, you know, language evolves, so we can all understand this, and we need to keep the content updated. So can you talk a little bit more about how this process of constantly updating works in these systems?
Yeah, I'd like to cover a couple of things here. Let me first of all share an example about kind of disambiguation in concepts, because I think you make a really valid point. And as you know, we talk, you know, I understand what you're saying because I understand the context of what you're talking about. But if you were just to throw a word out there, something like Java, I would have no idea whether you were talking about a programming language or an island off Indonesia or a kind of coffee. So let me just share another slide with you that hopefully helps with this kind of point about how a neural network model can actually help in terms of disambiguation and how language might have different meanings. So if, for example, you said depression, you know, we're all sitting at home in the middle of a pandemic, so I thought it was an appropriate example. I could be talking about a depression in geology. I might also be talking about a low pressure area in terms of earth sciences, meteorology and climatology. Alternatively, I might be talking about an economic depression, so something in the realm of business and economics or monetary policy. And if I was talking about an economic depression, there are a range of different things that I could be referring to. I could be talking about the Great Depression. I could be talking about the Long Depression. I could be talking about the Depression of 1920 or 21. Equally, I might be talking about a different kind of depression, depression in the mood. I could be talking about a physiological depression or a major depressive disorder. So I could carry on going for several more slides, but I think this helps maybe expand on the point you were making. So when somebody comes and they're doing a search, maybe looking for depression, but there's no way a platform will necessarily know. So there are different ways that technology deals with that today. Some platforms track your user behavior and they say, well, last time you were coming to my search bar, you were looking for, you know, the Great Depression. So when you put in depression, I'm going to give you all that stuff about the Great Depression. That has obviously some good things in some ways, but it means that if you are coming to that same platform when you are this time looking about a physiological depression, you're not going to get the right things. So the way in which you can deal with it in a knowledge graph environment is you can offer people all of these options. You can say to them when they come along, you can say, well, are you talking about the Great Depression, or are you talking about the Long Depression, or a low pressure area, or a geologic depression? So you can offer people that kind of disambiguation at the front end. You don't have to guess that because of their previous behavior or because of what they asked about last time, if that's what they mean. So I think that's a major advantage. And I think the other thing about kind of concept evolution is that as a term changes over time, now that technology has moved on and AI technology is not just hunting for keywords, but it's also understanding the context, it can understand if the word has the same meaning. So another example would be if somebody comes along and they're searching for something like Brexit, which has been a very popular phrase since about 2016, it will say, I understand that the meaning of that word is exactly the same as UK exit from the European Union. So I'm going to give you all of the results, not only where I see that word, but also where I understand that it's about UK exit from the European Union. And if that specific word hasn't been used, it's about that subject. So I feel like the intelligence that's come with the evolution of AI in terms of the neural network models that are now developed really can be super helpful in terms of helping people get to the right thing, and in some ways overcoming the kind of issue we have about the volume of information.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. The advances upon keyword searching are much more than we think. And I think, Leah, if we could have the second poll question, I think that would be interesting. Are you and your students and researchers able to formulate good search queries? And do they know the best databases and search tools to use? I think for, in a lot of ways, search is a very important, AI is a very important contributor to the question of improving search, but it's not always clear which tools are doing what, because AI does a lot of different things. And I think the knowledge graph, being that it is about concept searching rather than keyword searching, is very important.
And I will display the survey results after I close again. So
Okay.
right now it looks like there's still a couple of votes trailing in, but mostly it's 13% say yes all the time, 75% say sometimes, and 13% say rarely.
Yeah.
It looks like it's slowing down now. If there's any more, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Oh, there we go. So sometimes is the clear winner.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, it's, most people have some idea what they're searching. Most of us don't do big, complex thesaurus searches and Boolean searches and so on. And I think that's one of the things about AI, is that it can help us to get away from all these complicated ways of being a searcher that are really difficult. And I often hear librarians say that, since students really frequently have a very difficult time formulating a good search, the search tools, it's not always the tool and what it does that can be helpful if they cannot formulate a proper search. And I think, Ruth, it's interesting to ask, which parts of AI do you think are the most important for libraries and publishers or content owners in this way, helping people to find and locate their content and use the best content they available?
It's a really, really great and very broad question. So I think let me start off with a kind of philosophical answer, and then let me give you an actual real example. So I think philosophically, what we believe at Yewno is that you should actually create an environment with everybody in an ecosystem. So you don't have to know if publisher X, Y, or Z is theoretically the best publisher in that particular field. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And even if they are, there could be some relevant information from a very niche publisher or in an archive that might be super relevant to your queries. So we believe that philosophically, having an environment where you have as many publishers or contributors as possible, of course, highly peer-reviewed and high quality, not scraped content, but that kind of content, and also across all domains. So I had an interesting conversation with somebody once who worked in an engineering library, and the dean of that department had come and given a big talk to the students about the fact that great discovery would come in the future from interdisciplinary domains. And within their library, they had amazing engineering content. But when you went there, you would find amazing engineering content, but you wouldn't find anything else. So this posed the question to the students of, how do I do that? So I think creating an environment where you don't necessarily know the best place to go for engineering is X, the best place to go for social science is Y, the best place to go for humanities is whatever. And because it's very difficult, and because there isn't one good place. And again, because if it's true that great discovery in the future will come from the intersection of different domains, and I think it's highly likely, then you need to create that way for people to traverse across different types of content. And let me give you an example of maybe how a student might sort of approach a search, not really knowing the right kind of terminology to use. So if I put in something, there's been a lot in the press at the moment about sort of undocumented people of various things. I myself, I think what's cool, I think I'm a legal alien, which means I'm, as you can hear, not American, but I'm allowed to live here because I've got a green card. So let's say I just came to a search bar and I put in undocumented. I could mean all kinds of things. Am I talking about an undocumented feature? Well, actually, no, I've been watching the news about all these undocumented people. That's not what I mean. Could I be talking about undocumented students? Possibly. Undocumented youth, maybe. The undocumented, a particular program. Healthcare for undocumented, very interesting. North Carolina has something, an unidentified flying object. Or actually, this is really what I meant. I wasn't using that term, but that's kind of what I meant. I was talking about it from that sense, because that's what I've been seeing on the news. So I think it can really help people when an AI platform can understand the different interpretations of a word that are not literally kind of a pure NLP approach. And I think the other thing is, even if you then find that, and we have this definition here, is the entry of a person or a group in a way that violates the immigration laws, you can say, is that what I was talking about? Yeah, I see a definition. I'm clear that was what I was after here. And then you get this kind of picture here, and you can see all of these different things, and it kind of gives you a sense of all of the different things that are related to what you're looking for. So, you kind of actually have links here to some of the issues that arise, refugee camps, human trafficking, all kinds of other people. So you get the context of what you're looking at, and it gives you that perspective of all of these different angles around that particular term or topic that is of interest to you at that moment. So I think from that point of view, in terms of people not knowing where to go, an environment which has multiple different types of content, different domains of content, different content providers, and also which is able to give you some kind of context and perspective can be really valuable.
Yeah, and I think when we look at this, the display of the information as well, I think with traditional search engines that return enormous lists of content, which you then have to go through one at a time to try to decide which of them matches your topic. And also when you're searching, when you're searching an academic database, you're often getting very specific, very detailed results. The visual display, which also allows you to take in the range of responses and possibilities, is an advantage over a list. Could you just talk a little bit more about the advantages of this visual display?
Yeah, so I think if you are, for example, let's take it from a sort of a researcher point of view. So let's say, you're late teens, early 20s, and you've gone to a lecture and your professor has set you some kind of assignment or homework to do. They may have said, write about a certain area. And I think sometimes people, first of all, they need to understand more about that area before they can write about it. And they need to understand and also find something of interest. So I think to your point, Matthew, about visualization, I think being able to visualize, if you think about all of these relationships, you would have had to read, I don't know how many dozens of articles to pick up all of these ideas, but you can really, really quickly look at this and say, well, what am I interested to write about? And there'll be something that, resonates with you. And you can click on that, you can understand more, and it's very engaging. And I think in terms of what we found out from research, the thing that researchers or users find really annoying about search today is searching for hours and hours and not finding what you're looking for. So you want to create an environment where people don't waste a lot of time. And I think also in that point where people don't always know the answer. I mean, that's the whole point about search. You start because you have an idea, but you don't know enough to be able to formulate, the title for the paper that you're going to write, etc. And I think the display in this kind of visualization can really help with that, and also explaining links and connections that you wouldn't even have known to look for in the first place.
Yeah, and I think it's also a fact that even if you're entering searches and looking for articles, this is also a very useful way of forming a research project. It isn't just results. It also gives you a range of different topics to think about. Because it's concept-based and not keyword-based, it gives you a sort of constellation of related ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you can traverse around these. And if I said, well, here I see refugee camp, actually, I'm kind of interested in that. I can also say, well, how does refugee camp relate to all these other things? And you can see it relates to illegal immigration and statelessness, etc., refugees in various countries. And if I say, well, yeah, I really am interested, maybe this could be the way in which I take my homework or I take my paper, you can kind of click on that and you can expand further, and you can look further into your research. And if I say, well, I'd really like to expand that concept and dig a little bit deeper, you can do all of these things sort of quite quickly. And again, it's very visual. So I can now look at the connection between illegal immigration and refugee camps, and I can see all these things. And it just really helps you understand those connections and suggests things that you maybe weren't originally thinking about.
Yeah, and this, and obviously this is a result of being a knowledge graph based. It is consistently updated because new information is always flowing in, and because it's concept based, it doesn't require that you have one word that is the correct word. And again, when you're searching in traditional keyword search, all those differences between different sorts of depression, for instance, are not differentiated. So you're getting all of that kind of depression and having to filter it out.
Absolutely, or else the platform is second guessing what you're thinking. And you may be using the same term, but you know what you're thinking. And one day it's about a sort of meteorological depression, and the next minute it's about an economic depression. But it will have taken your previous behavior, and it will then influence that next set of results. And I think that's not what you want either, particularly from a learning environment where you're traversing across different subjects, and it's highly likely that the next time you do something, you may well be studying, for example, a different course.
Yeah. Well, why don't we look at a few questions from a subject that I'm interested in, excuse me, and that we also spoke about at the Charleston Conference last month. I once wrote a book about the Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Budge. So this is not a computer science or science topic.
This guy here?
Yeah. So when you're writing about somebody like Wallace Budge, an Egyptologist in the Victorian days, you can see that he is at the center of the constellation, but all the things that we relate to him, Egyptology, Flinders Petrie, who was one of his competitors, really. He worked in the British Museum. He studied all sorts of different topics around ancient Egypt. Hormuz Rassam was an explorer with whom he had many conflicts. But we can see from this constellation that there are not only people associated with him, but also, for instance, Jean-François Champollion, who deciphered the ancient Egyptian language, I think in 1838. You also have some Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese Egyptologist whose work about the origins of ancient Egypt in Africa as an African civilization was influenced by Budge's work, which also said that Africa or Egypt should be considered an African civilization, which was actually very controversial at that time. So this gives you a constellation of his world and things to think about in relationship to his specialties. Why don't we try another one, Ruth?
Yep.
The Rosetta Stone. So the Rosetta Stone was, there it is. Rosetta Stone was this stele that was dug up by Napoleon's soldiers in 1799 that was really important to deciphering the ancient Egyptian language because it had 3 inscriptions in different languages, one in the hieroglyphs, the familiar ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, one in Demotic, which was sort of the day-to-day writing of the ancient Egyptian language, and then one in ancient Greek. And since everybody could read ancient Greek, they then used the stone to figure out how those 2 completely dead languages worked. So if you see down at the bottom, Rosetta Stone, it's attached to things like Ptolemaic decrees, demotic Egyptian, decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs, British Museum, because that's where it wound up, because the British got it from the French when they were all invading Egypt. So it gives you a range of different associations with Rosetta Stone other than just a simple definition. Why don't we try one other? Book of the Dead, a book that Budge translated, published in the late 19th century. It was very, very important to a lot of novelists and poets and people into ancient religions and stuff like that. So if we see Book of the Dead, you can see all of the different ways that it was associated with ancient Egypt, with mythology, but also with Dorothy Eady and others, who were people for whom this was an important book, both in ancient Egypt and in the modern world. And you can see the connections between all three of those, where they interact, where they intersect. And so, there are multiple ways of thinking about these different concepts within the context established through all three. So Ruth, when you look at this, how does this then relate to the knowledge graph?
So what you're seeing here is obviously a visualization of a particular layer in the knowledge graph. So the knowledge graph has over 5 million concepts. And the great thing about a knowledge graph, or a graph in general, is it's a fantastically flexible mathematical instrument. So you've asked the knowledge graph with its 5.5 million concepts, these specific queries, and it's able to pull up for you those queries and the relevant relationships. And if something was to be updated, then you could see tomorrow, you could do the same search and you might see a new link, a different link, for example. So what's really, really great about it is that it will always be kept up to date as new information is ingested and included. And the key thing for me really is that I don't think it's ever been possible before to show relationships, because I think in traditional database structures, obviously a traditional database is great at organizing and storing information, but it's not making those links across information. And actually the links, the connections are really, really important. And I think the ability to have those connections in a graph and to understand that the strength or lack of strength in a connection is really, really important and useful. And it gives you this ability to paint a picture. And it's a picture that can help you learn and can help you understand.
Yeah, and I think these are obviously older concepts, older topics. But still, if there were to discover a new version of the Book of the Dead, it would then be ingested and update all of different relationships, because they might find a relationship to another ancient culture or something like that, which would create a new thing. But you can imagine then, when you're dealing with hard sciences and technology, that as new information is discovered, such as with COVID-19, the relationships can change very quickly when they have new information.
Absolutely. And I think, and that's one of the things where a knowledge graph can really help, because there's no way that any of us can actually read everything that's being published and keep on top of it. And so you need a way of actually being able to keep on top of your subject without reading everything that has been produced. And I think that's where a space where technology can really help all of us. And I think the way in which technologies evolve now, and that there's a technology that not only hunts for a keyword, so it's kind of better than we were before, but then you still end up with a really, really long list of things that you can't read, but it can actually understand what it's about and then give you this kind of precision in your results, and also paint the picture. So not just about giving you results about that, but about giving you context. And I think the other thing is the unexpected, because one thing that's really great about knowledge graphs is there's everything you know to look for. So I can tell from how you've just described, what is Budge and Book of the Dead. You're an expert, Matthew. You knew about this. But what if I was doing it? I'm not an expert. Or what if somebody's just started a course and they're 18? They wouldn't necessarily know. But even if we went back to your first search on Wallace Budge, that would have told us all of these relationships and all of these other connections that we wouldn't have known, but they could be really interesting. And as we expanded those in this kind of visual environment, we would have learned things that we would never, ever have looked for because we didn't know to look for them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, for us, in many ways, a lot of what people ask when we're talking about AI is how can these technologies be introduced into libraries? And it's obvious that in search, that is a one application, but how else can AI be introduced into what libraries do?
It is a really good question. And when I first started talking to people way back in sort of 2016, and some people said, oh, I've introduced AI into my library. I've built the AI room, and people can go there, and it's a space where they can study and things. And I think a lot of people did create kind of space or a physical facility. I think looking back on 2020 and what we've seen, I sort of feel we need to make sure that whatever we do is available to most people in some kind of remote way, because even when we're not stuck in a pandemic, there's always somebody who, for whatever reason, can't travel. Maybe we'll get a snowstorm and you're going to be stuck at home. So I always think about it kind of in a remote sense. So it's kind of available to everybody, no matter where they are or what country they're in, etc. And I think the key thing I would think about is, what is it that a library is offering and how is it helping people? And I think one of the angles we've talked about a lot is about search. The other reason I might have gone to a library if I was able to go or travel is I might be asking somebody for advice. And of course, those things aren't possible today because I'm not able to travel. And I think this goes back to an artificial intelligence-based environment where it's able to sort of offer those connections, offer those suggestions, and show you things that you wouldn't have known to look for. So if you have some incredible system, but you need to know where to look, that's pretty difficult when everybody's remote. But actually, if you can create a kind of environment that will automatically suggest, similar to sort of what we're looking at now, if you could say if there's a way in which you can help people without a person physically being there to answer their question. So I think there is this huge kind of role and value that, in a physical sense, you might go and ask a question to a real person. And you can say, well, how far can an AI environment recreate that for you? So it doesn't matter what time of day, doesn't matter what day of the week, doesn't matter what location. You're really helping people find what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, a lot of libraries also have, institutional repositories, proprietary collections, special collections that are very valuable, but they can often be kind of difficult to access. So do you think AI can help us with this kind of challenge in discovering that kind of material? But before you go into that, let's ask Leah if we could ask the third question. For the third poll question, does your library have an institutional repository? As this is one of those things we often hear now, is that as libraries increasingly with more open access materials and with access to easily gained materials in English from your vendors, one of the questions librarians often will ask is, what can we do that everybody else can't do? And institutional repositories are often brought up in that.
Responses are slowing, but it's looking like 90% are saying yes and 10% are saying no. I'll give it another couple seconds here.
Okay.
I don't see any more coming in, so I'm going to close it and put the results up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So almost everybody has an institutional repository. Well, and I guess then we would have a fourth question. Is your institutional repository easily discoverable through online searching? I mean, do the results come easily through online searching?
I have a feeling this one's going to be a little more split. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, right now it's looking about 80% yes, 20% no. So
Yeah.
slowing down. All right, well, we ended at 75-25, it looks like.
Okay, well, it's still pretty good. I guess, Ruth, what do you think then about how AI can help, even if the materials are easily discovered? How do you think it would be AI can help with this?
It's a really interesting question because AI, as we sort of discussed up until now, is brilliant at dealing with huge volumes of information. And I think when you're talking about a repository, you're not talking about 100 million items, probably. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll leave somebody to send a message on the chat if I'm misunderstanding. But I think if you take everything we've said, and we're in an environment which can deal with, tens of million, hundreds of million items, and you've got a repository which might have 10,000, 50,000, whatever, but in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of items rather than the millions, then you've got this massive amount of information, and how can you make it stand out? What's also interesting, I think, about the repository side of things is one of the questions I was asked when I started showing people the knowledge graph years ago was, people said, I'm interested in what has been published on my institution and also about connecting my community. And you say, oh, it's kind of very interesting. So people would say things like, I think there are people here, maybe even in my corridor, that are working on stuff that's interesting to me, but I just don't know, because people, what they do at a very high level, but you don't know the detail. So I can show you one thing that we've done about a way of understanding within the big knowledge graph, actually, how your institution has, covered things or published on things. And so I'm going to show you another example now, and it's the same interface as we just showed in the previous searches, but I'm looking for haptic technology. So I start writing haptic, here comes haptic technology, so I'll select that. But the key difference you'll see when the graph builds is that previously when you were looking at this graph, you were seeing only circles. And now here you're seeing the little squares. And so as I look at the graph, I can immediately see where there is a square. That means that somebody in my institution has put something that covers that in the repository. So visually, I can immediately say, that's super interesting. So these are all of the things we've covered, and other things haven't been covered. So if, for example, I wanted to find those people so I could talk to them, email them, meet up with them, learn from them, I could go and search through the document filters. I could find those items that they'd written. So here we see there's an institution author. I can click on that. I can find what it is. And I can even click into that item. I can read a little bit about it. And I can see the names of the people. So this is an institution in Milan, in Italy. And these are the authors of that paper. So I might know them, I might not know them, but now I know their names. And so I can go back and I can connect with them if I'm interested in the sense from my research. So I do like this feature. I feel like although AI is brilliant at dealing with this huge volume that we can't cope with, it can also help you surface. So if you do have a particular collection, maybe it's your repository of dissertations, or maybe it's a special collection, you can also understand that in the context of the bigger amount of content that you subscribe to or that you own. And I think it can really help in terms of connecting communities and making those relationships between people, so people can better identify who is actually working on the same things as them. And another example, actually, somebody mentioned to me, is that if, for example, you were evaluating something, maybe somebody is suggesting a further research path, you might want to say, well, before I authorize or before I approve this research, let me see what we've got already on this subject. So, you could use it to understand how much you've already published. And if it's something that's trending or growing in interest, you might want to publish further, but you might also say, well, we've got a lot, that's enough. And if you were trying to find somebody to review something that has been presented, it can also help you find the experts within your own community who are in a position to help you to evaluate what has been produced.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably a good, at least gives us all an idea of what it practically means to deal with AI in an information context like ours. it isn't just about dealing with the volume of materials, but also understanding the connections between them. And this is a really important difference that can make a huge difference to those of us doing research in not spending so much time going through things, trying to decide whether or not they're relevant. So why don't we take some questions if people have questions. Leah, do you see those, or am I able to see them as well?
Yes, you should be able to click Q&A and see there's a couple in there. You see
yes,
those?
thank you. Thank you, yes. So Ruth, a question, is it transparent what content or sources Yewno indexes from?
Yep, that's a really good question. We have lists, so you can ask for the list of whatever you like, or you could have the list of everything. So if you want it broken down by books, journals, dissertations, news, etc., or the whole list. So yeah, do drop me an email if you'd like me to send that to you. No problem.
Okay. Have you considered, Ruth, enabling people to take notes in a constellation in addition to visualizing, processing research in a constellation or graph?
Great question. So if you look at the screen, there is a little notes button there. So you can actually click on that and you can write your own notes and you can store them. So I'm not going to show you my desk, but I have on my desk many yellow sticky notes stuck up. I also use notes functionality, and I have several pieces of paper, I'm afraid. So I know that we all take notes in different ways. And the idea of this is that wherever you are in your research, when you have a thought, you can quickly capture that thought and it will be stored for you and then linked to the rest of your research. So yeah, that is a great idea. And I love that one.
What should publishers do to take advantage of AI?
So I think if you're a publisher, your biggest asset is the content that you own. And do you really know what you own? So, you know, most publishers who haven't been founded in the last couple of years have content that may go back decades or even hundreds of years. So there's probably nobody there who could possibly remember or have read all of that. And if you go back over the different times in which content has been published, it will have different levels of semantic metadata. And when I say semantic metadata, I'm not talking about things like author, title, publication year. I'm talking about what we would have called topics or keywords. So if you have a very limited amount of semantic metadata, that's really all you know about what you have in your backlist. And it makes it limited in terms of how you can then make your potential customers, your existing customers aware of how much is contained in that. It also means that you can't relate it back to what's happening, for example, in the news. So if we take an example, if Michelle Obama had been written about in a book in, 1985, at that point, she might not have been the first lady, and it might not have been something that was of that much interest to people. But equally, now it would be super interesting to know what she was doing at that point in time. So that becomes relevant, and you can link that with how people are trending in the news and what is changing over time. So I would say the most important thing is to know what you've got. And then once you know, you can at that point help people find what they're looking for, and you can also market your content better.
Yeah. What is the software that underpins and renders the knowledge graphs shown today?
So there are lots of different types of knowledge graph and people doing different things. So I can tell you from our own perspective, it's our technology which we built, which is proprietary. There are knowledge graph platforms like Neo4j, which is obviously called a knowledge graph, but it's a totally different approach to us. So you can use that. It's like a framework to build a knowledge graph, but then you'd have to populate it with all of the different types of content. So it's a pretty big area, and there are lots of different things. You also find there are domain-specific knowledge graphs. So some people will use it for a specific domain, like either finance or life sciences. So you can't, it's not a kind of one-size-fits-all single answer. You need to investigate with the individual kind of vendor or provider of that platform and ask them, exactly what they're using today to power their knowledge graph.
Does something like Google use a knowledge graph?
It's really interesting because Google always talks about a knowledge graph, but they don't do the sort of visualization. But I mean, they are very sophisticated. They do employ, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm sure that somebody somewhere has some kind of knowledge graph base.
Yeah, okay. I was curious because it seems like it's a generic concept, knowledge graph, but all sorts of different ways of using them.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, Matthew, because there is no universally accepted definition of a knowledge graph. So a lot of people see something like a visualization like I've been showing you, and what we are showing you is powered by a knowledge graph, and it does store the connections, etc. However, you could also create just a visualization where you can't actually click on the links, and you can't necessarily, and those links aren't updated. So a knowledge graph is not a visualization of information in a graph. It is completely different technology underlying that, which is based on a neural network model and you know, a very different algorithmic approach.
Yeah. So the knowledge graph isn't actually, it has no specific outcome. It's just an updatable, it's the sort of technology that allows you to update knowledge and concepts and so on. Let's see, let me, okay, what's the difference between using AI to find and locate information and how it's used to establish a user's level of knowledge?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's more in the learning space. So I think what we've seen in terms of users' knowledge is that in a knowledge graph environment, because it's so visual, you can use it to whatever level you need. So if somebody, for example, looks at the knowledge graph and they're a 16-year-old, what we see them doing is they spend a huge amount of time in the actual graph themselves. They really love the fact that they find definitions for everything that they're looking for. And when they get into the document search, they love the snippets. They're not that interested to download and read the full documents. And as you get from there to sort of undergraduate, graduate level, you find some people are actually more interested in spending a lot more time in the lists of things and filtering their lists and creating lists. So part of it is related to your personal research style. But knowledge graphs or the knowledge graph interface is a very accessible thing, and it kind of draws people in because whatever age you are and whatever level of understanding you have, you will find non-obvious connections. And even if you do a search on a very complicated matter that somebody has been a professor of for 20 or 30 years, they will find something that they didn't know was connected. Equally, a younger researcher might find many, many things they didn't know were connected. So you can use it to whatever level you're interested in. If you've got 20 minutes to prepare for something, you obviously won't interrogate 30 different concepts. You'll interrogate a much smaller number. Equally, if you're doing a PhD and you have 5 years, you can interrogate all of the different paths, all of the different angles, and keep delving to your heart's content to the full depths that are offered. So it's very customizable, and it's, you know, people are able to really personalize their learning journey.
Okay, and I think this is the last question. Are individuals able to access AI outside of an institution?
It's a big question in terms of the kind of full spectrum of AI-powered products. I can't answer for everyone else's products. For our products, yes, whether you're part of an institution, if you are part of an institution, you always have off-spectrum remote access, and we do have individual subscribers as well. So if you are asking from a Yewno perspective, I can answer that. I couldn't tell you from everyone else.
Okay. I think, oh, there's just one more comment in the chat. It says AI can certainly help discover patterns and interconnections between results in a search. And I think that's what we have been demonstrating with the Yewno visual results. I think that's all we have. Leah?
Yes, I don't see any other questions that have come in. So if anybody has anything, they can put it in the chat or give us a question in the Q&A there. But otherwise, I'll say thank you to Ruth and Matthew for this wonderful putting a closure on the series here. And I would also invite all of you, we have another webinar next Wednesday, same time, Wednesday, 2 p.m., organizing for OA, new business models for collective action. So that'll be our last webinar of 2020, closing out the season here. But thank you all for being here. This is a fascinating conversation. I love seeing the graphs and the demos there. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Join us next week. Happy holidays otherwise. Take care.
Very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.